Hey y'all, my name is Nat. I hope you're having a terrific day today, and for this video we're going to be doing an ARC reading vlog. Alright, before I get into anything bookish, make sure to hit like and subscribe down below, as well as tell me in the comments if you heard about these books. Are these books on your TBR? Do you want to read them now? Let's talk about it. If this is your first one of these, ARC stands for Advanced Reader Copy, meaning I got copies of these from the publishers and the authors to review. Dutton was actually kind enough to send me a copy of The Faculty Lounge by Jennifer Mathieu. I'm so excited for this one, particularly because 𝗖cie by Jennifer Mathieu is one of my favorite YA novels, and I think this is actually going to be her first adult work. I didn't really look up too much about this one, but I do know we were following a collection of teachers and faculty members who work at this one high school. I believe it's probably set in southern Texas because most of Mathieu's books are. And I think we're following this cast of characters as they're dealing with a lot of issues that are very prevalent nowadays when it comes to education and everything that it means to be a teacher. But on the other side, I got Morbidly Yours by Ivy Fairbank from G.P. Putnam's Sons. I am so excited for this one as well because this cover is adorable and the idea of this sounds so much fun. It is a rom-com where we're following a man who is an undertaker. His grandfather recently passed. He believed he would be inheriting the family business, but apparently there was a stipulation in his grandfather's will that he has to be married by the age of 35 or else the business will be left to his father. And then on the opposite side, we're following this animator who from the cover looks like to be the total opposite of our hero. And I think she ends up finding out about this situation and trying to help him out, maybe introducing him to some women or giving him some flirting tips. But of course, you know, the two of them end up getting closer and sparks fly. I'm very excited for this one. Again, the idea behind it sounds like so much fun. It's an opposites attract romance, which is right up my alley. I can't freaking wait to get to both of these books, so I will talk to y'all when I have started into one of them. Hey guys, so I am at about 51% into The Faculty Lounge. A, have just not prioritized filming this update for way too long, but B, I'm actually getting really engaged into this story and I'm a little worried that if I don't film this now, I won't film it before I finish the book. Halfway point, and I'm actually really enjoying this. It is both exactly what I went into this book expecting, but also not quite handling it in the way I was expecting. So yes, we're following a collection of teachers who work at this Houston high school, which is a pretty big school. I mean, if you know anything about Texas schools, they tend to be pretty big. There's a large cast here, and thankfully there is a cast list at the beginning of the story which tells you the different teacher and like what they teach, or there's also some admin and like what their position is. This feels very reminiscent of like short stories because every chapters are through a different person's perspective, and each of them seem to focus on a different element of the story that they're wanting to highlight, a different issue that is relevant for teachers. For example, the current chapter I'm in is focusing on the teachers celebrating around the holidays, and they do this gift exchange where they kind of set up like White Elephant, but it's utilizing gifts that they get from their students that are really weird and things that are just like very lightly associated with being a teacher, but not necessarily things they actually want. And there was a funny comment about, you know, if the students or the parents actually cared about them, they would just give them cash. Maybe we're gonna dive into something a little bit deeper in this chapter, but right now it seems a little bit silly and more fun in comparison to like the previous chapter, which was focusing on, she was an assistant principal actually, who is realizing that she is an alcoholic and is finally having to come to terms with that. There was a chapter that was about school lockdowns, so it was actually through the eyes of two younger teachers who, it's mentioned, they kind of grew up in like the Columbine era. These situations are more normal to them in comparison to like their older counterparts who are still having to get used to this sort of a setup and this sort of a situation. One of the teachers actually reminisced about experiencing a lockdown as a student where she was in the bathroom when one took place. She didn't know what to do. So now as an adult, she's so much more aware of students who might not necessarily be where they're supposed to be when a lockdown is engaged. There was also a chapter that kind of loosely touches on banned books, themes that parents might not necessarily agree their children should be learning about, but educators look at it through the viewpoint of this challenges their worldview and helps them to learn how to have their own opinion and make that opinion, not just copy the parents' opinion. But really, I think the one that's still standing out the most is the first chapter where this book starts off, where a veteran teacher who is now working as a sub passes away in the faculty lounge. They don't know what to do because the medical examiner is on his way, but he won't be there for some time, and they're trying to keep this as quiet, as unscandalous as possible, so they have to ensure no students possibly will enter the faculty lounge. The sub also wants his remains to be scattered on school property. So again, this book is exactly what I was expecting, talking about these topics that unfortunately teachers just have to deal with, but also the strain that having such a time-consuming job has on someone's personal relationships. Like I said, the alcoholism discussion. Matthew is really balancing that line between being funny and lighthearted while also tackling some pretty heavy and realistic topics that are very, unfortunately, just very relevant to today. And I am really enjoying this, actually. Like I said, every chapter kind of feels like its own vignettes, but there will be references to situations from the prior chapters. There's like a little bit of a romance developing between two of the teachers, and it's been acknowledged that other more senior teachers can tell something's going on there. Basically, it's going quite well for me. It's not really a book I would have expected to pick up, but I'm very glad that Dutton sent me a copy and kind of forced me into reading it because I do really enjoy Matthew's writing style. There is actually one chapter that is told in multimedia format where it's alternating between emails and text messages, so that also was kind of interesting and sort of changed things up and made that chapter a little bit more memorable. I am really enjoying it. Hey guys, I've officially finished out The Faculty Lounge by Jennifer Mathieu, and I did really like this book. I think it just shines a light on an area that goes underappreciated a lot nowadays, which unfortunately is educators, but even within education, I think the author also took the time to shine a light on certain people in the faculty who go underappreciated. The janitor, counselors, the school nurse. I really thought it was very cool that Matthew included everybody involved in the everyday workings of this school. Still like elements that are outside their control, which is the central office that's kind of its own looming character in the background of many of those chapters. This book definitely covered some really rough topics. I think I mentioned previously that you do see a chapter with a lockdown. There's a chapter about teenage pregnancy, book banning, addiction issues, discussions around immigration, an inappropriate relationship between a teacher and a student. This book really encapsulates so many problems faculty members in education have to deal with. And yet it was really impressive that the book never felt depressing. It always had this air of hopefulness, and there was always an undercurrent of humor going on in the story. I really thought the author did a fantastic job of just like keeping the tone light while talking about some very heavy things. It was so humanizing of every single character we see. I really liked that because it was awesome how even though you only spend a single chapter in every person's perspective, but nearly every character felt fully fleshed out, and you were able to see the dynamics they had with different people at this school in not only their own chapters, but then sometimes in other people's chapters as well. However, I do think because there were some characters dealing with heavier topics, those were a lot more memorable than some that were more focused on just like the person's day-to-day life. And so it was easier for me to forget about those in comparison to the really powerful, hard-hitting, standout chapters. Towards the end of the book, I also did start to feel like I would have appreciated seeing another chapter through some of these characters' eyes again, just to see, I wonder how this person was reacting to this situation. I wonder how that person experienced this situation. But I think that also just comes back to the fact that Matthew really did some phenomenal character work in the prior chapters I experienced with those people because I wanted more time to appreciate them. Like I said, I really enjoyed this across the board. A very high 4-star. I think if you work in education or somebody close to you in your life works in education, you'll really appreciate this story. I really enjoyed it. I highly recommend. It was a very short, quick read. I don't really have anything else to say about it except I continue to really enjoy everything Jennifer Mathieu writes. Hey guys, so I don't even know how far into Morbidly Yours I am. I'll just put up my percentage on the screen. I'm already really enjoying this. NetGalley apparently made it so that you can highlight stuff now, and I do really like that, so I have been highlighting. I'll have to get a physical copy of this. I just have a feeling I'm gonna enjoy this enough to want a physical copy. Lark, our female main character, is just so bubbly. She's so colorful. At one point she gets described as Barbie, and like honestly, I love that for her. And yet when we see through her eyes, she is really still dealing with the grief of having lost her husband and now uprooting her entire life to try and start over. So I'm really appreciating getting to see the duality of her character there. And then on the opposite side with Callum, I really like him also. He's honestly my kind of man. Dry, sarcastic, a little grumpy, a little grumbly, really kind dude. He's really never been that interested in romance, and unfortunately in his line of work, he doesn't meet a lot of women, and he also has a job that is still very stigmatized. Not a great thing to easily talk about. However, I'm really enjoying the way the funeral home is being discussed. I definitely think, having read Caitlin Doughty's books, it kind of has shifted my perception on the death industry. But at the same time, like, Callum can admit the fact that, like, it's an unusual job and it's an aspect of our society that a lot of people don't like to talk about. He's also a little bit anxious. He's got a bit of a stutter sometimes. Hilarious though. This man is great at just dry delivery. Probably my favorite thing of this book so far though is the way humor has been utilized, because a lot of times it revolves around death or the funeral home. More than one have been just silly little puns, but it's so funny. From him giving her a ride in the hearse, glorious, to a stand-up comic making like vampire and Barbie jokes about them. I love this sort of opposites attract in a couple. It's also just so freaking sweet. Like, you can already tell these two just enjoy each other's company. I'm really liking this. I can't wait to continue reading it tonight. Hi guys. So I literally cannot describe to you how much it's gonna hurt me to say this, but I've decided to DNF Morbidly Yours. This hurts so much because from the start of requesting this book at NetGalley, I was so excited. I mean, it has a punny title, it has a really cute cover, it has a fun opposites attract romance setup. Like, I knew I was gonna love this book, and I'm not. And it hurts even more because the first 75 pages of this book were doing so well. Honestly, it was going so good. Like, as you saw in my last update, I was having so much fun with this story. And now I'm not. I really liked the fact that Lark was able to like weasel her way into Callum's shell and really kind of help him open up a little bit more to someone that, you know, is quite opposite to him. But what I'm not loving about this book is the stupid, contrived, ridiculous excuses as to why they can't be together. It got so old so fast. Lark has essentially sworn herself to singledom because she blames herself for her husband's passing. And she thinks that any other man who deigns to love her is also gonna end up in the same situation, which, like, baby girl, please just get some therapy. I could kind of understand her reasoning or like how she was processing that trauma if it had just happened, if this was like a relatively recent thing. But her husband passed like 2 years prior. I know everybody grieves differently. Maybe it's just my personality that has a hard time understanding putting yourself in that situation and staying there, not trying to improve it at all. I can't with it. Then on the opposite side, Callum, you know, is forced by the circumstances that he really needs to put his focus on a real romantic relationship. And unfortunately, that's just not happening because he's already fallen for Lark. He is swooning over her, and he fears ruining their friendship because she said that she's never going to be with anybody again. I'm like, oh my God, that excuse is just so tired. It's so cliched, and yet every single time these two hang out, anytime they're interacting, it feels like a date. I mean, I don't understand how they're doing some of the things they're doing and still insisting this is platonic. I cannot comprehend that. And that just made me more annoyed by the excuses. I wish this actually would have taken the jump into doing like a marriage of convenience, which was what I expected actually when I first requested this book from NetGalley. I thought that was the trope this was going towards. But it feels like that's what the author wanted to do, but kind of like chickened out of it. Instead though, this poor girl who actually does have feelings for Callum gets like put in the middle of this really awkward situation because doesn't actually like her that way. I loved Callum. Like, he has a little bit of a stutter. He is constantly wearing black clothing or clothing that just makes him look a lot older than he is. He's this really dry sense of humor that's kind of morbid at times. I adored his character. But the fact that he's putting 𝗖cie in this very uncomfortable situation made me so angry, and just, I don't like that. You've made me fall in love with this character and now you're making me hate him because of the circumstances. Rounding back to the fact that Callum is demisexual. I just didn't really like how the author was handling his sexuality. It didn't feel authentic. The coming out scene he has with Lark genuinely felt painful, and so many little things are thrown in that are common stereotypes asexual people have to experience, and that just felt really icky. But then he ends up developing feelings for Lark quite quickly, and then off of those feelings starts lusting after her, which I wasn't convinced that he had had enough time to really develop these strong feelings for that to be taking place, given the fact that he's demisexual. So basically boiled down to the fact that it felt like this representation was for the sake of representation. It didn't feel well researched or well utilized in the story. And then kind of going off of that, like I said, I didn't feel like enough time had actually gone by for both of these characters to be like head over heels for each other. And I think that comes down to how the pacing of the story is going. The friendship develops really fast. And certain scenes are actually omitted that I felt like would have been useful to see the developing of their relationship and understand how they're starting to have feelings that aren't platonic towards one another. But like I said, those scenes were either omitted, they're glossed over, they're just referenced to, and I didn't like that. But at the same time, I was 46% into this book, and like the last 20% of it felt like such a slog. The story was going so slow. I'm just so sad. I am so sad with how this one turned out. I did not think I would be writing up a rant review when I requested this from NetGalley. On that really disappointing note, that's it for today, y'all. Thank you so much for coming to my channel. I really appreciate it. Make sure to hit like and subscribe down below. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, leave me a coffin emoji in the comments. I have all my socials as well as a few ways you can support me linked in the description, and I come out with videos on Monday and Friday. But until then, I hope you continue to have a terrific day. Love you, bye!